There we go. Good evening, Boston Unity Group. It is January and it's a brand new year. We have now reached 2022 and we are still not in person. And this makes us sad.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly.
We're alive and that's
Yes.
good. So, we're alive, we're healthy, and hopefully you're all healthy, right? I'm not speaking on behalf of you here, but you look great.
As my grandfather would say, I'm still above ground. So
it's been so long since I've seen any of you that I wonder if you're one of those new Unity AI avatars or something.
Oh, maybe. That was quite exciting. I can't remember the name of the technology, but it's good, it's new on it.
Metahuman-like.
Metahuman-like, yes. This is the Unity response to the metahumans. So soon we'll have fake humans everywhere in all of our games. So, someone's got to do it. That's great. But yeah, so that happened. What else have we got? It's 2022. And has 2021 gone final release yet? I don't think it has it? We're still in the tech releases for 2021 editor, or is it?
That's a good question. You're usually on the bleeding edge of stuff. Do you know?
I have no clue.
2021 has not gone to LTS yet, I don't think. I think it's supposed to soon.
Cool. That's all right. I've still got another day at least because the editor hasn't told me there's a new version yet. I just downloaded the latest LTS this week, and it was 2020.3.26, I think.
Right.
So it's been going for a while now, but it's pretty rock solid now.
They should rename that. 2020 is kind of a shitty year.
Yeah.
Was 2021 much better? So
it's like hotels with no 13th floor. You just skip that year.
Skip
whatever.
Skip the 2020s. Yeah. We'll get back on track eventually. So yeah, we're here. Welcome. I don't know if you're a first-time viewer or a long-time viewer, or whether you've seen us in person or haven't. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're doing a talk tonight. I'm doing a talk tonight on Scriptable Object Architecture. Before I get started, are there any announcements? Do we have?
Well, let's see what's.
Is there anything cooking on the Game Dev Slack? The Boston Game Dev Slack, if you haven't joined it, is a vibrant community full of mostly local area, Boston-ish, New England-ish game developers, serious developers, unserious developers, frivolous developers, and all sorts. Some of them fled the country. Some of them are no longer local, but there's a good bunch of people. And if you have Unity questions, this is a good place to ask them. And thank you, Graham, for posting the link.
Yep, that's the one thing I do.
You do
I post links.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're welcome to join the Slack if you have any questions about Unity or just development in general or business development, all sorts.
There's also the other meetup, the one that we're not part of, but we're kind of kindred spirits with, the Boston Game Dev Meetup.
Yes.
Page, which has like a bunch of other events that maybe Graham has that and copy paste in his report already.
It's actually just bostongamedev.com. So. But I can also post the direct.
That's useful. Yeah. So because we're sponsored by Unity, we have a separate meetup page, but the rest of the Boston Game Dev events are all posted on that meetup page. So there you can find out about the indies meetups, the audio meetups, all the rest of it. So yeah,
I like how you slipped in the audio meetups.
Yeah,
we won't talk about
there was a small clash on the old calendar there. It's a shame because I kind of wouldn't have minded seeing the audio meetup, but anyway.
Yeah. We've remedied the situation. We've talked to audio people, and we're gonna avoid this going forward.
They heard us.
It happens.
Well, as audio people, you would hope they would. But I'm sorry. I'm trying.
Does anybody have announcements that they could want to post in the chat?
If anyone has an announcement, please type it in. We would love to hear anything you're doing. Are you working on any games released? Any games upcoming? Steam wishlistables? Cafe meeting on Friday. Yes. Is it Pioneer Valley meetups? Like the morning coffee on Friday mornings? Aaron, can you post the link into chat? I see you there. It's early. It's like 8:30, I think, which depends on your definition of early.
I mean, we're game developers. Who gets up at like 8:30 if you don't have kids, right? Come on.
Yeah. No, if you have the kids, you get up at 6:30 and then you just
yeah.
dissolve into a pile of whatever whilst you're having a coffee, trying to become human again.
Not to humble brag, but I did have to start a 5 a.m. meeting last Wednesday to work with a team in Paris and Australia, and the median time for us to all meet happened to be 5 a.m. East Coast time.
That's astonishing.
That was a bad day.
No thanks.
Anyone doing Global Game Jam? Or
not me.
No.
So I'm not either.
Do either of you know it's like a whole week, right? But in the past it's been 2 days, so you just do like 2 days out of the week, or how does it work?
I think they announced early what the theme was, but it actually kicks off Friday to Sunday. But I think they just kind of announced what it was, and I'm not sure. There's no sun at 6:30. Yeah, I'm skipping it this year, unfortunately. But that's another event this weekend, and then we have the Boston Festival of Indie Games coming up.
Oh, that's true.
That's right.
That's true. Is registration still open for that? I'll have to look at it on the other window.
Today was your last chance to sign up for a discounted rate at GDC.
Yeah. 1 year I'll go. 1 year.
Yeah, so FIG is the 5th, which I guess is next Saturday. Is that correct? Yeah, a week from Saturday. And it's all virtual, and I think it's like pay what you want, so it's really accessible.
Yeah,
it's generally pretty chill.
And are they doing it via Gather again?
Yeah.
Gather is a great little online meetup, virtual presence mashup. I highly recommend. You can move your little character around and then say hi to people when you run into them, and it's not quite the same as seeing them in person, but it's not bad. It's actually pretty fun. And yeah, FIG shows are always full of really good talks, so it's well worth popping in. We do have 2 things to mention. There's a work in progress from Kuro Monkey called Q Redux on Steam, a Celtic Egyptian open world fantasy where you play a healer on a personal journey to rescue a mentor. Learn powerful new sorceries as you discover magic, mix salves, and help alt-gendered spirits in this Souls-like action RPG. Wow, I'm going to just click that link. Everybody on the stream is going to see this now. Look at that. Awesome. A work in progress, and it has a Steam page. That's half the job done right there. Nice work. When are you going to let us know if you're thinking of releasing it this year or whenever? Love to hear more about your progress. We also have a job announcement from Bear Account for a Unity lead developer, a remote position for a health tech startup. If I click this link, you'll also see this one. Lots of details. I'm not going to read all that out on the stream. Y'all can go there in the link. The link's in the chat, so I'm just doing half the work for you at this point. So, do we have JetBrains licenses to give away?
Yes, we do. We have a couple. I'll have to think of some good questions for afterwards. So the way this will work is we'll ask a couple of questions. They'll be very straightforward if you've been paying attention. And whoever answers it first in the chat, and it'll be like the first 2 or 3 people will get a license to JetBrains, which is an IDE for C# that you can use with Unity, which is really awesome. I use it almost every day. I do a lot of C++ stuff these days, which for various reasons, and they have a C++ version that is really good too. It's way better than Visual Studio, so highly recommend it. And you get it free for a year. So
definitely recommend it. I did hesitate this evening. I was going to do the code demos in Rider, but then I thought actually what I'll do is I'll do my code demos in Visual Studio Code just to keep it lowest common denominator. Now I can speak. Denominator.
Yeah.
So that everyone can basically follow along at home without an unfamiliar editor in front of them.
Chris, you have a leading question.
I have a leading question. We haven't got that far yet. I haven't used that one, the Odin serialize scriptable object, but I hear it's very good. Everyone raves about Odin, so. Oh, cool. Yeah, okay. Bear account, you're the hiring manager. Nice. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Should I get started?
Are you ready?
I don't know. For those watching at home, it's one thing to present a stream, it's another thing entirely to do a presentation whilst presenting a stream. So if there are any technical hitches, I do apologise in advance, and I hope that everything will go smoothly. If anything hiccups, I'm sure the guys will tell me. So we'll see what we can do. I am going to, for their benefit mostly, share my screen, but it also gives us the benefit of I can then have a little camera in the corner so you can see me whilst I'm making a presentation for you all. Okay, so I made a slide deck and everything. This is a talk about Scriptable Objects, and specifically the Scriptable Object Architecture library that is really awesome. A little bit about me. Where did my notes go? I did make some notes. Here they are. I've been doing this a while. Yeah, I started using Unity when it was still version 2 and moved to America in 2010. And that was when I met Boston Unity Group. It was the first meetup group for Unity. And I went along and met some awesome people, and I've been using Unity on and off ever since. I have done virtual world stuff. I made a virtual world platform. We were working on something that was a bit like a Second Life kind of an environment, but in Unity, with avatars and a chat system and inventory, and we bundled it up into a little project kit so you could just import it into your game. This is before the asset store. Yeah, so that was interesting, and it was an interesting excursion into the world of multiplayer and networking and packets and TCP and UDP and all the fun that goes with that. I've also done a bunch of days of visualizations, simulation stuff. I made a astronomy app a couple of years ago, which plotted the constellations in the sky and highlighted them, and it was designed for high school and college kids who wanted to learn about how to navigate around the world based on where the constellations were in the sky, trying to figure out their latitude, longitude. And it was all multiplayer and ran on the Quest, the HoloLens, and the PC. So multi-platform, multi-VR kind of craziness. That was a very interesting experiment. And I've just come off 9 months working on a game that used a lot of scriptable objects. A lot of scriptable object fun. And that's why I kind of wanted to just wrap that up with a quick talk. Hopefully you'll learn something from my my tired brain that spent 9 months looking at this stuff. And yes, I am one of the organizers of the group. So yeah, you know that. So what can I say about Scriptable Objects? I don't know if we can do a hands up as to who has used them before, who's new at them. Let's see if you're, let me know if you have used them before, are using them actively, or don't know what they are. Any kind of feedback in chat would be great, so I can sort of make sure that I target you a bit more appropriately. Essentially, I would say that they are, they're kind of like social distancing for your projects. They keep things separated. It's a good way of keeping your data and your presentation separate. This is a standard practice across web platform technologies. And the idea that I most loved when I started using them in depth was to just get rid of all of the cross-component linking, where I had a thing that had to reference to that thing, and then that one had to reference to this one, and I can't possibly do that without reference to that object. And it was all very much interdependencies, and changing scenes was a nightmare. You had to have lots of don't destroy on load. You had to have lots of singletons, and it's messy. First time viewer. Oh, hello, Yusuf. Yes, the astronomy game is publicly available. It's actually an open source GitHub project. I can probably bring it up quickly, can't I? I have to bring it up on another machine because I don't want to break up my tabs. Let me bring it up here a second.
Do you want me to find it, Chris, for you?
You might be able to find it. Actually, I got it right here. It's on my favorite list, but I cannot put that in my web browser because of NDA reasons. Here you go. It was called Caesar. Spelt incorrectly. It was the connections between Earth and stars in AR. Was the original acronym. It was terrible. We had to come up with all sorts of acronyms when we were working on these projects. I think the most recent version, when I was working there, they moved it on to mostly just the HoloLens at this point. HoloLens and web. The Quest wasn't as supported, but we do have lots of branches where you could just find the branch that worked with the Quest, because everything changed in Unity when it came to VR and XR and everything between 2019 and 2020. So branches everywhere. You can never have too many branches in Git. So, Inhusen. Sorry, Graham.
Looks like we have a pretty broad spectrum of experience with scriptable objects. So
awesome.
Yeah, lots of people who haven't used them, lots of people who've used them a ton, anywhere in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will try and keep I'm not going to go too much into the basics of them, but I will just introduce them briefly. There are 2 links on the screen at the moment, but I do have them in a copy-pastable format that I just have to click that window, and then there. Those are just the starter links is the first links I'm going to show you. There's so many links I'm going to paste in here. Richard Fine's talk goes in a little deep and isn't as accessible as some of the other talks that I've seen, but it was pretty much the first that really went into this in detail. The recent Unity video, I saw that one today and I was watching it, and it's pretty cool. It's showing how they used them in the field. But one that I want to talk about today is the Scriptable Object Architecture package that has basically been created by people based on a talk from a chap called Ryan Hipple. That was a lot of words. Ryan's talk is absolutely legendary, and I cannot recommend it enough. He presented it in an extremely accessible way, and it was just kind of everything clicked after watching his talk. How can I use these and actually use them in a way that makes my life easier? It's an absolute great talk. If you haven't seen it, 2017, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but now it's actually quite a few years, isn't it? But anyway, great talk, watch it. And so what's happened as a result of that talk is there is a library available now that you can either get from the Unity Asset Store or you can get from GitHub. And again, I'm going to bring more links in to the chat. So this is the Asset Store page. Awesome and free, and look at all the stars. Everybody loves this. And not this one. That's spoilers, that one. You can't have that one yet. You can have this one. Daniel Evelyn's Scriptable Object Architecture. It's great. It's got some solid people who have worked on this. And I noticed Jeff Campbell's on the list. Jeff is one of the members of the Boston Game Dev Slack and occasionally pops in with lots of comments and stuff. So props to Jeff for working on this. There's a bunch of people who I've seen talking about this library. It's great. Everything you'll need comes from this library. So how do I use it? What's it for? And why? Well, my goal is to try and reduce all of the everything you want to find. I want to find this, I want to find that. Get me the objects of type, find objects of type, everything of type this, that, and the other. And there's a lot of lookups and a lot of trying to locate whatever it is you're trying to look for. I want to get rid of all of the manual stuff. Like my UI, we needed to have a reference to a game manager that knew about players in a scene, or then you would maybe put some things into singletons. So you would have a single instance of a class that would give you my current number of players connected, the current thing I am doing, and lots of static fields in other classes that you can just access. A lot of this stuff is fine, and there are places for all of this, but you will eventually find yourself running into hiccups, coming across problems where you don't destroyed on load, and then you've got something that's been loaded and it doesn't feel right, and you're not sure if your state is correct or not. Tidying up and making it more coherent and easier to access. These are my goals, and they're good goals. They work. So this is a really simple scriptable object. This is an attack, and it has a name, and I can give it a sprite. I can give it some numbers if I want to damage an enemy, or if I want to damage myself, or maybe heal myself, I could just use a negative number. And if I want to spawn some sort of effects when I perform an attack, I have a reference there to a prefab that I can just instantiate. And this is a really simple little object. And I can, once I have created this script, I can create an attack. So if I'm looking for the menu, I'm like, okay, I'm going to create one of my demo game attack objects. So let's create an attack. So I've created 4 in this little screenshot that I don't know how well you can see it, but one of them's electric, one's fire, one is ice, and one is toxic. Fairly simple. And each of them have different values for damage, which is, fairly normal. And if I look at one of those, I have an icon that I could maybe display on the screen when I want to click it to launch that attack, and that's how much damage I could be doing. So that's a really simple scriptable object. And here's another one. This is playing around with, how could I make a turn-based game? So I make a little game that, and these shouldn't be visible. Google Slides, you've let me down again. Please only look at this box. Ignore all the stuff on the right. Don't look at that. So we've got I made a little thing called the turn state that has a name, and it can also reference what other turns are valid after it. So after my start turn, I could then go to a friendly turn or an enemy turn, but I can't go directly to the end turn state. And this is just something you could maybe do. Maybe you could insert a tutorial state. I might want to go from a start state to a tutorial state before I go into the main game where I do my turn-based combat or whatever. I can have a validate method. These are really useful. You can validate your scriptable objects. So you can say, when I create this, are the values that are entered good values? Are we working in the right, working on the right thing here? Let me show you a quick demo, and I can maybe show you a bit more about what I am trying to say. This one here. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. I can read that perfectly. It's turned on dark mode again. Now I can't read my own text. Thanks, computer. So, display name, display icon, damage, and attack effects. All right, this is a slightly simplified version. I didn't bother with damage to enemy, damage to self. I'm just doing damage. It's easier to deal with for a demo. And I created a scriptable object. You basically create a new class, and instead of it being a mono behavior, you call it a scriptable object. And you give it an asset menu attribute that's how you'll find it when you create a new one. So if I go to Unity, I can here in my Windows key plus, whee! No, that doesn't work. Oh, does it? It does work. There we go. So in my assets folder, I can create a new attack. So I could just go right click in here, create. I hope you like the sound effects that come with this. A new attack. I'm going to have to turn off the zoom for a moment because there we go. All right, so my new attack. It's called new attack. What should we call it? What should we call it, chat? Any recommendations? I am recording this presentation, Bearcat, yes. I'm going to sneeze. Now I'm going to cough. Baja Blast. Sounds great. Let's do it. Baja Blast. All right. Let's say it's going to do 10 damage. That's its name. Oh, it's already populated this field. Now, how did it just enter that text? Well, that came from the script, which I was just showing you. The onValidate fires whenever I edit this object. So it's going to tell me. It's not going to tell me anything. If my display name is not set, it's going to set it to the name of the object. So because I called it Baja Blast, as soon as I edited this object, the validate method runs, which is I've wrapped it here in an if Unity editor just to highlight the fact that, in fact, this isn't actually necessary. It is just an editor-only method. This runs when you save it in the editor. So this is going to fill in that field for me, which is great. So if I forgot to name it, it's okay. It's going to get a default name. And I also added some validation. It's not really validation, but it's fairly common sense. If I've entered a really low number for damage, I'm going to see a message in the console saying that my attack looks too weak. So let's see that again. So Baja Blast. I can now edit this again. That's fine. That won't be overwritten because it's no longer null or empty. I can give it an icon. I don't have many great icons in here, but let's give it a biohazard. I'm currently set it to damage of 10, and I think the damage threshold was 5, so if I just remove the 0, you'll see in my console down here, this attack looks too weak. So we probably don't want to set it to 1. So immediately I've given some feedback to whoever is creating assets that could be used as attacks, that the attack that they've made isn't strong enough. So I don't have to tell a designer anything particularly about this manually. I could just say, here you go, make a bunch of attacks, and then we'll just use those attacks when we can build the level. And the designer can go in, make attacks, and if any of them look like they're too weak, that will be noticed and flagged. And we have a better way of doing that later. But for now, we have a manually entered number of 5. It's very arbitrary, but 5 is not good enough, in my opinion. And I can assign a prefab to this field, so I'll just reuse the fire attack for now. These are just little prefabs. They are really, really simple particle effects. They're very exciting particle effects. There we go, see? Very exciting. So that's how I create a new one. That now is somewhere in my file system. Here it is, Baja Blast. And if I save, you do need to save your project if you've made any changes to these assets for them to be saved to your disk. Once you do that, however, you can have a look in your Git client. Here I go. I made a new asset file called Baja Blast, and I'm going to make that a bit bigger because that is a bit small. So Baja Blast is my new attack, and I can see over here, this is what it looks like, and it's quite readable. It's not a big blob of text or code or anything. It just has all the information I want. It's literally called Baja Blast. The display name is Baja Blast. And it has a damage of 10. And I can see that it has a prefab that is referenced, an icon that is referenced. These I don't need to worry about too much, but I can see it in here. And if I make changes to this file, I'll see that in a diff on a standard diff machine in Gitty diff machiney thing. I like Fork. Fork's great. Fork saves me from all sorts of fun. So anyway, that's a new attack. What else was I going to show you? I was going to show you some other stuff. I had another scriptable object here that I'm not actually using this reference. I can remove it, I think. Remove your unused usings. You don't need them. This was another simple scriptable object. This is where I'm going to be storing my game state. I set up an enum, because you're allowed to do that too. You can replace all your enums with scriptable objects should you want to, but you don't have to. There's no rule saying you have to. So if you still want some enums, that's okay and that's great. So I can, in here, I have got a lot of things that I might want to think about. What have I got? So this knows what current phase of the game is. Are we in setup mode? Have we started? Have we finished? Let me make the text bigger. Come on, what's it? Control? No, Shift. Oh, what's the key? Control plus. Yes, Control plus. Thank you. Visual Studio Code. Control plus makes text big. I hope that is readable. This is being recorded at least. And the code will be available after the show. So this one here we have, I have references to characters. So this field is private. Let's start with game phase. This is a private field. This doesn't appear in the inspector. This also does not appear in the inspector. It's a public reference to this field back here. It's only just going to return me the value. I can't modify it externally. And I don't think Unity is going to show it to you in the inspector. Let me double check this just to be safe for myself. Not sure what you were just doing there, computer, but thank you. Game state. Yeah, game state not going to show me. But other scripts can reference that because they can also look at this game state and they'll find out what phase we're in. Are we setting up or are we fighting? So I can use things like a simple struct in here, and as long as it's serializable, I can use a simple struct that contains a player character. You can nest all sorts of things inside of Scriptable Objects. So this is just going to literally refer to my player character. I could have just had a public character on this Scriptable Object, but I figured why not just show you can make other things appear in a Scriptable Object. So this one has a runtime character that I've arbitrarily said, let's use that. Let's make a new runtime character if we don't have a character already selected. So if I haven't done this before, it'll just make me a new one where I can then get my current character. I think I changed that from a class. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine for now. Ignore. So anyway, I can store reference to my current player. Let me show you how this works in the game. So, this is a very exciting game. I do hope you're ready for this. I'm going to choose a player, and I'm going to choose the green player. And now look, I am the green player, and these are 3 others. I could choose the orange player, and now I am the orange player, and there are 3 other players here. But look over here, the game state is now reflecting the fact that I chose orange, or I chose green, because these buttons are setting the currently selected player on the game state. So there's that. Okay, great. And if I stop playing, it still says green. So I can run it again. Well, I've already set a character. What happens if I start the game? Well, I've already got a character. So there's my green character. He's there already. So I had already selected green. So when I come back to the game later, my progress has been saved. So this is another nice little feature about these scriptable objects, is that they're nice to work with visually in the editor. They are fun to work with in code, and you can just serialize them out and load them back in again. This is all being part of the project. It's just going to save it, and I can use it again next time. But you could write this out to JSON, use it as literally as a save file. I selected this character. This character has this much health. And load it up the next time, deserialize it, and it will work. It's good for that. There's lots of extra information about how to do that. I'm not going to go into detail on that tonight. However, let's go back to where I was. What was I talking about? I can't remember anymore. Back to slides, I think. I think so. I think it's time. Oh, look. Oh, yeah. When I'm initializing, I set it into setup phase. Someone calls this. Do I need to talk about that now? I don't think so. Let's go back to slides. All right. Oh yeah, this one here, you may have noticed this on the previous slide. I didn't talk about it at the time, but whenever you create these scriptable objects, they all have the same boring icon, and it is very boring to see the same boring icon. Behold, all my attacks are all the same icon. But you can make new ones, make new icons. They're great. You just stick an icon file inside of a folder called gizmos. This is just an icon I got from gameicons.net. It's a great site. And that means that anything that is based on the turn state definition, it has to match the name exactly. It's going to have that icon. So where I have defined what turn states we have in this game, I don't know where I added them now. I think I need to zoom back out again. Turn states, there they are. You'll see here my turn states all have that little icon. It's nice. Nice little feature. So yeah. Now then. Do you have any questions so far?
Doesn't look like it.
Good. Okay, if you do, let me know. I will move on to the next slide. So little things to remember with the scriptable objects. They're not mono behaviors. You can use them in your game. They're great, but they're not going to do the whole start, awake, and update that you would need in a mono behavior, which is fine. But I can still put methods in a scriptable object. So I can still call through and say, I need you to do this, that, and the other. And the scriptable object will go, sure, because it's like another class. You're just calling a method on another class. So if I need to do something more frequently, I can just call through to my scriptable objects method. Validate is really super useful. OnValidate is great. You can put all sorts of logic in there to validate that the end data that has been put into your scriptable object by somebody else perhaps who is working with your project is just not insane. It's not crazy. This is good data. And you can raise events from inside a scriptable object, which is really useful. I wonder if I just turn this off. It's already off. There we go. Okay. Now I can read my notes. I can read my notes now. This is great. So, Scriptable Object Architecture library that I mentioned prior to this. It's really good. We can either install it from the asset store or by editing your manifest.json. So if you want to do the simple route, you can do it via the asset store. And you can go to this extremely easy to type link that I will...
I think you posted it earlier.
Did I post it? Oh, good. You've already got it then.
Yeah.
That's fine. You can also Google for it. It's not hard to find. Or you can edit the manifest. So let's just show you. If you were to import it into a project, once you've got it from the asset store, it will appear in your package manager. Here it is. It is made by Evelyn Games, so you know it's the right people. Based on Ryan's talk. Love to the Ryan. And we have here the preview of the asset. This is great, and you can just click import, and that will put them all into your assets folder. Comes with a bunch of documentation and comes with a bunch of examples. So if you have seen Ryan's talk, which I know some people here might have done, you can literally play demos that look very similar to the demos he has in his talk, where you can move this cube into the sphere of pain and do damage to your cube, and the health bar goes down. These are basically verbatim the same examples he showed. They have examples of using events and using collections. So it's great. You can just import it and play with it like that. If you go down the other route, and as I mentioned, you can edit your manifest JSON. This is not as scary as it might sound. You can just go to one of these windows. Manifest JSON. Look at this. This is a whole bunch of modules. But you following their instructions off the GitHub page, you can grab the link to the latest stable release from the Git repository. And yeah, just stick that in your dependencies list, and it will then be imported into your project. And what I have done with my demo, you'll notice that if I shrink all the folders up in here. There is no folder for the Scriptable Object Architecture in the Assets folder. It's great. It's all in packages. So all the data's there, and I could drag things out of there if I actually want them in my project, but they aren't going to be checked in to my Git repository. They're not going to get in the way. They're just tidily out of the way. So that's why I do like doing it via the manifest, but whichever is easiest for you. So, with that in mind, what was next? Here we go. All right, so now we've imported it. What do we get? Why is this thing so useful? Well, we now get a few things that I lent on quite heavily, which over the last few months, which were just really useful. So I'm going to talk about just 4-ish objects that they make available out of that package. We've got game events, which are a nice way of working with events. Float variables, so that we can monitor values and react to changes. GameObject variable, which will give us a reference to an object that is a serialized asset that we don't have to have in the top of a file all the time. This is my player, this is still my player, this is my player again. It all comes from one asset that will track who your current player is. And a GameObject collection where you can have, say, all your enemies in a bucket, and that bucket is then serialized into an asset thanks to the library. It's really useful. So I start with some custom events, because events are always one of those things you will get a lot of questions in various places. What's the best way to do events in Unity? How do you do events in Unity? And I know everyone's got a different answer. There are so many ways of doing this. This is just a different way of doing it, and this is a custom event. Why am I looking at custom events? No, you haven't gone there yet. No. Demo of using a game event. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. Let's go back to the code. Not that one. I'm going to close that one. We don't need that one anymore. We hope. All right, so I'm going to use a game event, which comes with the new library. And in that, I am going to make a particle system do something amazing. Behold my particles. Let's see it again. So, how can we make these particles do the particle thing? Let's make an event and have that event trigger the particles. So, let's go into my scripts folder. Assets. Here we go. It's my assets folder. All right. Let's make a new event. Let's call it. I'm going to go right click and create. And look at this. Here we have 3 new menu options. And this is very hard to see. So here it is in big. So I'm going to try and make this easier. This is very difficult with multiple monitor setup. Right. So you go create. And you have choices of collections, variables, or game events. And those are 3 menus that come with the new package. So I'm going to make a game event. And it's down here now. And I'm going to call it show particles. So I made a game event called show particles. And you'll see in the inspector, it just gives me an option to raise the event. Well, nothing's listening, so nothing's going to happen. But I can manually raise an event just by clicking a button, which I like. So I now go to my particle system and I say, well, I want you to do the thing when the event happens. So I'm going to add a game event listener. And it's going to listen for the show particles event. And when that happens, you yourself can do your particle system thing. It's just going to listen for it, and then it's going to do the particle thing. So I can test this by going to the show particles and clicking the raise button whilst the game is running. So I click play, and let's just raise the event. Behold, we have particles. And I didn't have to write a single line of code. Events without code, we like this. So, but more than that now, I can now react to that event in other places. So if I have a UI designer who's working on some UI and that says, well, you know what, when I hear the particles event, maybe I want to hide these buttons. They can do that. How would we do that? Well, we can just go to the main UI and say, let's make all of this smaller so we can all see it. Add a game event listener. Let's have show particles. And we'll make sure that we just, I have no idea if this is actually going to work. Let's do it on the fly. GameObject. Set active false. So when I click that event, now I can now show my particles, and hopefully the menu also turns off. It does. So there we go. So now we've got a pointless but no lines of code, 0 lines of code event that I am now listening for, that is a custom event, and it just works, which is great. So that's a standard event from the Scriptable Object Architecture library. Doesn't have anything special in the event details. It's very vanilla, but it's just what you need for just a blast of this is happening now. So now I can come to the next slide. This one's talking about custom events. So that's great. I can blast off a random event that does things. But most of the time when I want to broadcast an event, I want something specific to be going on when I do that. So I'm going to create a custom payload for the player select event. So I can have an event that fires when I select a player. And that means that when I raise that event, I am going to pass it, I'm blue, I am green, I am yellow, or whatever. And anything that subscribes to that event can handle that and listen for what player did you select and react to it accordingly. So I can then, when I click on a blue character perhaps, I can call a select character public method on this component. This is a mono behavior that is just sitting on my UI script. So when I select the blue character, it is going to say, I want the blue character to be selected, and it's going to just update the game state to say, I want the blue character to be selected. So in my game state, when I call select character, I can then raise the event saying, this is the character that has been selected. Fairly sure there's more to this. Oh yeah, here we go. So here in the game director, I can now listen for that. And when I've selected a new custom player, I can destroy any pre-existing custom player and create a new one, just an instantiate method. There we go. This is a mono behavior. This is a component running in the scene. It's going to be able to do stuff with transforms and all the rest that I might need to do when I create a new game object in a scene. And it's responding to a event that was raised by an asset that I created. It's just kind of fun. Don't forget to remove them. Tidy up. If you add, always take it away whenever is appropriate. So I'm going to show you character selection in this little game. So initially, we have the option to choose players. So I can choose players, and these guys in the main UI, if I can have a look at player selection, I'm going to move my hierarchy whilst the game is running over next to my inspector so that I can zoom in for you. All right, so my green player here, now I move my head out of the way, head in the way. Green player. This is a UI element on a canvas, and it has a button. And the button, when I click the button, at the moment I am doing two things because I can, but I don't need to anymore. What I was doing originally was telling the game director to select the player character. So what that was doing before, where's my game director? Here it is. All right, so initially I was selecting a player character. So in here, come back to that in a minute. Select player character this is a public method, so I can just call this. So I have a reference from my UI to my game director. This is something I don't want. And I can do things in here like, I'm going to destroy any existing characters, and I am going to make sure that my game state has a player character and it creates a new object in the scene that matches this player character. So after you have updated your game state with the character you selected, it would then do the instantiation part. Now, this is what we're getting away from because we don't need it anymore where we've got a custom event. So let's take that out. Let's say, don't want this one. And orange, I think you have the same thing. Right, that's gone. So we don't need that. Blue and yellow don't have it. Blue and yellow are ahead of the time. Now I can go back into my code and I can go, all right, so I want to make sure my game state, instead of just updating the player character in the game state, I also want to broadcast the event about which character was selected. So let's get rid of this version of select player character. Boop, it's gone. And let's get rid of this and get rid of this and select these and take out the quotes. So now I have a new event that I want called custom player selected. This is a public field. It's buried amongst my methods because I hid it down here, but I'm going to move it up to the top where all my variable declarations are. If I can. Here we are. There we go. Right. So this is a reference to an event that I haven't yet added in my game state. And it has a method that is going to not just set the character in the game state, but it's also going to raise the event about the character that was selected. So I can now get rid of all of those references that were linking things together. I'm just going to raise the event and listen for it on the other end. So I can go back to my game and it recompiles. Move that out of the way. And I can make sure now that my game state has a reference to the event because that's what we're going to be looking for. My game state is here. Oh, behold, it's already here. Well, thanks to the joys of serialization, it didn't forget what it was set before. So I can just click this button and here's my custom player selected event. I created this earlier. I could have created another one. You can keep creating them. I can create an event, custom character selected event. Maybe I wanted a different one. Maybe I want it to only fire at certain times. I get to control that. It could be the same kind of event, but fired at different times. You get to choose. But my game state now has a reference to the event. So if I run the game, when I choose a player, this is going to be too small. I select green, it creates the green one, the orange one, it's creating the orange one. I could choose blue or yellow. And you'll see here the player character is updating in my game state, which is fine. And these are all just getting the information and broadcasting it to the game director, which creates and instantiates all of the stuff that I want to show. So that's where we've got to so far. All right, this is going longer than I thought. This is fine. Any questions so far?
Looks like we don't have anything yet.
Yep. This is fine. This is fine.
Chris, I put in the chat because I was muted before. That I was just wondering, like, if you're getting a package via Git, sometimes when you install fork, it doesn't actually install Git into your system path, and so you'll get some errors there.
That's a good tip. Yeah, Git config can be finicky. Don't use GitHub Desktop. Don't do that to yourself. Just don't. It
happened on a project I was on recently where one person was like, I keep getting these errors and we couldn't figure it out, but it was Git wasn't in their system path.
That's a really...
But they were using like fork, and it was fine in fork, but not.
Yeah, not on the rest of it. Yeah, no, that's a good one. I've seen that a lot in the past, and I've forgotten about it because now I have Git everywhere. But yes, that's a good one. And GitHub Desktop, I do not recommend really beyond getting things from Git. It's fine for that, but if you ever need to work on a team, yeah. Just buy the bullet, get fork. You'll be fine. It's one of the most user-friendly, more powerful tools out there. So, okay, all right. I'm going to blast through some of these now. This is fairly fun. So, float variables. Do you remember when we talked about attacks and I had that arbitrary number buried inside of my code saying if damage was less than 5? Well, behold, there it is again in all of its glory. So this is terrible. You should never do this. Just don't leave things like this in your code. But we can do this in a much better way. What we can do is create a float variable, which is going to create an asset in our system, in our project, that we can set a value for. And I can now compare my damage with that value, which means my designer can say to me, hey, Chris, can we look, the minimum damage should be 10. 5 is just like crazy. 10 should be the minimum. So they can go in and change the asset without changing the code. Code doesn't need to be touched by designers. That's fine. This is great. They can go in and change the assets. So if I go back into my project, I can remember where I'm going. Okay, no, code first. Attack. So, in region V2, we have the improved version, so I'm going to take this out. Pew. Pew. And pew. And we're going to go here. Control/encode will uncomment. Really useful. Another pro tip for you there, guys. I'm going to drag this up here. Tidy. Right, now I've added a reference to a float variable, a public field. Right, where am I going to get this float variable from? But it's going to have the minimum recommended damage set in it. And I'm going to be able to get the value of this. And I'm going to be able to use it and warn people if their attacks are too weak. So let's go back to the project. And let's create, where's it gone? Let's create a variable and we're going to call it, I'm going to create variable float and we're going to call it minimum recommended damage. Because why not have a really long name? And let's say that 10 is the new minimum. So now, when I look at my attacks, these are my attacks. They all need a reference to this variable. Because I modified these scriptable object definitions, they need a reference to the new variable that I want to assign. You can multi-select this. So I'm going to select all of them. And they're all missing a float variable. And luckily enough, they all take the same one. They all have the same minimum recommended damage. So now, my attacks are all telling me, yeah, see, they even told me they didn't have the references there. But if I clear that now, so ice bomb, what if ice bomb suddenly got really weak and it went down to 2 damage? This attack looks too weak, and I'm immediately getting that feedback. So I'll put it back up to 20. And I left in a line of code that just comments every time that the validating code is running. Just it's sometimes useful to know when is this updating, and validate will run whenever you're editing the object. The enable only runs when your code recompiles or when you create the new asset. It's not like an enable when your game starts or anything like that. It's not the same level of frequency. But validating happens whenever I edit these things. So useful timing. So now my attacks are validated against an external float. And there's my minimum recommended damage. And I set it to a value of 10. And you can clamp values if you want to. They've added that feature. Oh, and yeah, there's Inspector UI can go a bit balked with these things sometimes. This is a feature now at this point. It's someone should probably look at that and try and add some more spacing to it. But it happens a fair bit with scriptable objects is that you'll end up writing some nice editor code that should lay out your scriptable object inspector UI, and it just goes completely wonky. So now the description is overlaid by its box, but that's fine. At least it has hint text because they thought ahead to add that. So that's a float variable. And I can pop back here. I can observe float variables because these float variables are really useful. And I can use, let's see. So this is setting some values for health. And this is initially, yeah, so this piece of code here, I'm initializing, no, go back. All right, let's look at this one first. So here I'm adding a listener to onHealth changed, for onHealth changed, for whatever my player character's health is changing. I can't go back. There we go, back. And these are float references, slightly different from a float variable, but they're very similar. I'll show you the difference in the UI in a moment. There's some nice little features in there. It's more for designers, again. But they're functionally, they will look the same in how they behave in code. So, and I'm going to observe the player character's health with a demo. So I have set it up so that my characters have different levels of health. So if I have a look at blue character, green character, orange character, and yellow character, they all have references to their own health variables. I created them here. They're down here in the health folder. So I'm going to see if I can zoom in a bit. There we are. There's my health variables. So I've got blue, green, orange, and yellow. And I have a couple of variables that I set up that could be used as their standard starting health value, or perhaps some of them will have lower initial health. And so when I set these up, I said that the starting health should be about 100. And if I have a lower health character, it'll have about 50. And the rest of these guys, they're going to get their values from the code that is elsewhere. So blue is going to go with the blue health, green, orange, and yellow. That looks different. I'm trying to remember what it was I did differently here. As my code is using something different from my slides. I'm fairly sure at this point in time. Yep, they're using variables. So the demo was showing you float references. These are float variables. This is fine. I'll show you the other in a minute. So these are just variables, but I could probably change these to references, but I'm not going to show you that right now because there are other things that will break. However, I'll create one. Let's create one. Here you go. Let's create another one called public. Am I still running? I'm probably still running. Still running. Get back to my code. Public float reference. Bug demo float. Okay, so we've got a float reference to bug demo float. No, that's not what I wanted. There we go. All right, and I can come back into my project. And so now if I add a float reference, you'll see it takes a float variable, but it also has this little drop down here. So I could add in, say, starting health. But instead of starting health, I could actually say I wanted to use a constant for this particular character and set it to 20. But you don't have to. You know, any other character could just carry on using the other references. It's another way of just making a nice accessible feature for people. But anyway, so I set it up so that I believe, do they all use the same starting health? I'm so disappointed. I think they do. Well, that won't be the case for long. Let's save that. Let's come back into my project. Let's say that yellow is going to be the low health character. Maybe this one's going to be a glass cannon. Let's give that one the low starting health. So if yellow is added, yellow will have a health of 50. currently, yellow's default is, I think it's actually set to 50 here. Let me just set this to 100. Can I do that here? I think I can. Obviously, these values are saved on subsequent runs. So now I'm going to run it. And let's choose a player. Here's green. Green health is currently 100. So I can create my green character and I can attack the blue player. Poor blue player. Blue health is down to 10. You'll see on the console here. And my green health has gone down. My green health is now down to 80 because it took 20 damage from the attack that blue sent its way. Blue health is reported on the console as being only 10, which is correct. Blue took a lot of damage there. So blue, not looking very healthy. So we've got ways of changing which values we are using on each of these characters. And we can observe changes to them. So when I took damage, my health bar went down. And this is the player health slider that went down when the currently selected player's health went down. So I literally have a listener that just waits for that. And it's looking up the value on the game state. We only need a reference to game state. Game state knows who the player character is. The player character knows what its health is. So we've got references within references. This is the reference. There we go. So this was set up on the character behavior. That's how I set it up. Now I remember. Character behavior is the mono behavior that runs in the scene on the character that is created by the game director. This guy is, it's the game object. It's got like a mesh and it's got the other stuff. But this is just my player character in the scene. And when this method runs, it checks to see if it has a specific health. And it will call through to its template, which is a character scriptable object, and it sets the initial value for the health in there. If it doesn't have one already. So we have two ways of doing it. One, we can either say just use the default health, please, character template, or character template, please set your health to what I have set it to. And this is using the float reference. So I could set the blue character to specifically to be to 30 health, which does explain why the blue character was looking quite so damaged. Poor blue. Now I remember. And the yellow character has low starting health on the character behavior. So it doesn't have to be set on the template. It can be set on the behavior. It could be set on the template. You have multiple places where you can set values, but it's up to you. It's your applications, your games, your designs. So yeah, this is just the initializing the health, just a loaded method. So I have one where I initialize the health to the value of the starting health variable, and one where I initialize the health to the new value that has been passed to it, and I just can set the value of this float variable in my code. You probably want some null reference checks if you've forgotten to add a reference, but you'll find out soon enough when you see the red arrows. Don't ignore red arrows; they're bad. And this was me setting up the health and the starting health on the character. Right. Moving on. We're almost there. Game object variables. These guys are fun. So this is just a way of referencing a game object. How many times have you said, hi, private game object, my current player? Or, let's just pass the game object around. You get to know who the player is, and now you get to know who the player is. Well, now I can have a variable that represents my player that doesn't have to be drag, drop, cross-reference wires between your components. This is just an asset in my project. It will know who the current player is. Or the current enemy. I can track the current enemy. That could be really useful if I want to target something. I'm going to fire my projectiles at the enemy. And I know where the enemy is because it's a game object that has a transform, has inside of the scene. So it has XYZ, it has rotation. Everything is set. And I can highlight the enemy that is targeted. My targeted enemy is a game object variable. These are in 4 different places. This is unhelpful. So yeah, you add a reference to your game object variable. When you want to assign to the variable, you just do GameObject variables name current target dot value equals a GameObject, and this is a reference to a GameObject. And then you can add a listener so that when that target has been changed, you can handle it. So this could be in a different script. This will probably be in one script, these first 2 lines, and then these will be in the second script. So in the second script, it's listening for changes to the target. When the target has changed, I want to highlight who the current target is. So let me show that quickly. It's here somewhere. Right. And we go through it. We choose the player. Who should be? It'll be blue. Will be weakling blue. And you'll see the little arrow on top of green's head. That is the current targeted player. But I could change that. I added some delightfully hacky code that changes which the current target is. And if I target yellow with an ice bomb, I'm now firing particles at yellow. Yellow knows which is the player. Yellow's still going to fire back at me. And that is because yellow and blue know who each other are. They've seen each other. So, where am I? My scene. In my scene, blue character, which is my player. And if I shrink up a lot of this stuff, my character behavior knows who the current targeted enemy is. It also knows who the current player is. This is the same script I'm using for my player and for my enemies. And it's basically a script that does one thing for one and one thing for another, quite simply. These values are set by my game director. So am I looking at my game director here? It has references to the custom player selected event. It has a collection of enemies that I'll talk about in a moment. And it has current targeted enemy and current player. These are set in my director so that it can just update the rest of the world when it needs to. So let's have a look at that code. It's over here, game director. So yeah, instantiate player, and then it creates the enemies. And this is just, I want to make them appear on the screen in somewhere. So there you go, delightful. There's better ways of doing that too. And I've added all my enemies, and in here I just have some silly cycling code to choose my target out of the index of how many enemies are in the scene. And I am setting the value of the current target to one of my enemies, which basically just updates the game object that it's pointing to. So when the game is running, I can look at the current targeted enemy is currently blue character. And I can click on that and you'll see it appearing here, which is very nice. It shows it me in the hierarchy. And I can double click and go and view it in more detail. Current targeted enemy, and I cycle through them with the Q and E keys for reasons. And the value changes. Notifying any listeners that might be listening in for changes. So that's great. That saves you a bunch of time. Then one other thing to mention. We have GameObject collection. So I've got a list of enemies. Now, in theory, the director can just store that list locally. Doesn't really need to give it to anybody else right now, but maybe it does. Maybe we need to think about that later. So let's use another scriptable object. This one's a GameObject collection, and it is literally a list of type GameObject. And you can add things to it and take things away from it, like you would do with any collection of list of things. And yeah, my game director just does that. It just adds things and removes them. You can also do this on instantiating an object. If that object knows it's going to need to be added to a collection, it can do it itself. So if I had those enemies and that one of those enemies died and it had a reference to this collection, it could just remove itself when it died because it's no longer a valid enemy. And I don't need it to tell the director that it's dead. It can just do it itself because it's more of a self-aware system. So you have choices as to how and where you wire this stuff up. And obviously my system is super lightweight, so it doesn't really require very much in terms of thinking as a demo. But yeah, so if I start my game, you'll see I've got 3 enemies here. that I can cycle between. And they are stored in the enemies collection, which is just an asset in here. It's got my list of my 3 enemies. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for most of the things I wanted to talk about. None of this is really earth-shattering stuff. It's just this is the most useful library I've come across in ages, and it makes Scriptable Objects even more useful than they already were. And you can do a lot more with it. So say if you wanted to have, say if all my UI needed a theme and it all needed the same kind of color, I'm not going to set that color individually on each UI component anymore. What I can do is create a variable of type color, and we'll call it UI theme color. And then my artists can come in and say, it needs to be slate blue, or whatever color that might be, or dark blue, light blue. There we go, a blue. That's it. There's my UI theme color. And I can just, instead of manually assigning a color to a UI element, I can add a little script that says on each UI component, just use that value, and it will do it for me. And then if I want to change my UI later, I can do it in one place. Or say if you're working on a level where everything on the screen is bright orange and you want your UI to stand out, maybe you'll change the UI color just for this one level you're working on. Or maybe in-game dynamically changing the UI color, because you can do that. And everything will respond to those changes if you code it up right. Or maybe we can have another one here that will be let's do a collection of vector 3s, and we're going to call it spawn points. So instead of that delightful hacky code where I was manually putting enemies on the screen, I can just say, there you go, just choose a spawn point, and I can have them appear wherever I decide they need to be. And so now I've got a list of fairly common spawn points that I don't need to set manually on a game object, on a monobehavior that is attached to a game object. I'm not typing in that stuff manually anymore. I'm doing it once here, and then I'm just referring to that elsewhere. And I can use it across scenes. I can use it across different components, and I can use it all over the place. Yeah. So I think that is it. I have a link to the slides. That's not really legible, but I do have that in a more copy-pastable format. I'm going to put them in here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please just let me know. Open the floor to any questions from anybody at this point in time. I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. I appear back on.
That was pretty cool. I like how the gameplay state is really visible to designers. Like that's a thing that we struggle with at SpryFox is like there's this huge sweeping game state. It's got all these variables in it. It's really hard. It's really opaque for designers or non-technical people to go in and look at stuff. So having it as a scriptable object makes it like it's right there. You can go look at it and see what the value is, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's great, especially like working with designers in particular. I would go in there and say, okay, right, fine. I'll add some attacks as per spec, and we can easily balance them later. And so my designer would come in after we'd made it. We'd played a few rounds to see how things would work out. And it's like, this feels totally underpowered. And he could go in and change the values without having to bother me, without having to edit the code. It's great. So. And yeah, and the whole idea that you could serialize this stuff to JSON and then unserialize it fairly easily means you could maybe have a JSON exporter from a spreadsheet that could go into your scriptable object somehow. I haven't looked at that in detail, but I'm like, well, why not?
Yeah.
Never got that far.
Why not?
It's an option, isn't it?
Another thing it does really slick, really slick, really nicely. It's really slick that it does this. Is verification. Like that's a huge deal when it comes to lots of like designer driven data. You want to make sure values are in ranges, and if you're referencing something, it exists somewhere else, and all these things. And so it makes a lot of that stuff really easy, which I don't think really comes across in a lot of the other presentations I've seen about this kind of scriptable object approach. So I was glad that you touched on that specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's extremely robust. I mean, I've used Scriptable Objects not in this way at all. I mean, like a most recent project, we're doing like music visualizer stuff with scenes and all kinds of stuff, and I wound up making Scriptable Objects for like configurations of other things that a designer can scroll through them and like set parameters and save out Scriptable Objects and read. This is next level. This is really cool.
Yeah.
And I know there's a couple people have been, or someone specifically has been asking me like, is this talk on Scriptable Objects or Scriptable Object Architecture? Because they're different, and boy, are they different. This
is just like some, an implementation of using this stuff in a way that is really accessible, and that's why I really liked it. When will it be uploaded to YouTube? Maybe tomorrow. If the we'll see.
Chris needs a break.
If the recording went well, it should be up within the next day or two. But yeah, no, I had a lot of fun using these Scriptable Objects. I was, cycling through targets on various enemies, and it worked so easily using this system. I could just update my targeting stuff to use the collection that I dynamically updated from objects that created in the scene, and it just worked. I always knew where my player was. I always knew who my enemy was, and you've got to know your enemies. So
yes. Keep them close.
Keep them close.
I have a question for you, Chris. Where do you sort of conceptually draw the line between I'm doing this in Scriptable Objects versus I'm doing this in a like visual scripting language versus I'm doing this in some other kind of tool? Like, how do you make that call? Because I feel like it can do, like, the thing about Scriptable Objects is they can do pretty much anything you want them to, right? So it's like, how do you sort the processes,
I guess it depends on who's working on it, how big the project is. I don't know. It depends on the use case. Sometimes I just want to get something done quickly. I find visual scripting to take a lot longer in general, but it has its cases. We used a Node Canvas to do state machine based AI stuff that would react differently to the state of an application changing. So I would expose a bunch of these variables to it, and then it would respond. It was like, this is fine. This is great. But yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. But yeah,
No, I think I think it depends on your team is a good answer. Yeah, because it's ultimately what it boils down to.
Whenever you're working on anything, it depends on your team. Like, occasionally we just needed to transfer some data across from one scene to another, and we didn't want to create another scriptable object for the purpose. I'm going to put a static field on this. It's fine. It's all right. You can just access that and set that value, and I'll know what string it is, and that'll be fine. Sometimes you need to just, test things out, figure it out before you get to the actual implementation. A couple of singletons isn't going to hurt anybody, but they're not the best.
Speaking of singletons, someone, Dead Bite Dawn, asked if there's examples of using this architecture with multiplayer environments, and how it interacts with remote procedure calls.
I don't have a demo of that. But essentially, yeah, I mean, it's just be aware of what you're modifying. If you're modifying a variable that is used across multiple things, everything's going to be affected by that. If all of your doors are set to open when the door open event happens, then all of the doors are going to open when the door open event happens for everybody. It's the door problem in multiplayer is the classic, isn't it? If I'm walking up to a door, will it open or not? If it opens for me, does it open for them? Does it, so if I have an event that I can broadcast to all connected clients that opens the door, then that's not such a bad thing, because everyone wants to see that the door is open. We can all go into the shop and buy whatever it is the purveyor has to sell. But yeah, multiplayer brain is a specialized skill.
Yes, it is.
yes, it is. Yeah. Might also depend on your multiplayer architecture, like your framework that you're using for multiplayer as well. I haven't done Unity multiplayer for a little while now, thankfully. Actually, no, it's only been about a couple of years. Last time I did multiplayer work, it was with the astronomy app, and this was before I dived into Scriptable Objects. So sadly, that app is full of singleton, don't destroy unload crap. I'm really sorry. I didn't know any better at the time. I have learned better since then. This is the whole part of being a developer, right? You keep learning new skills and adapt. But that one's a multiplayer game that was using a network engine stack thing called Calisius that is basically a superb little Node app that ran on a web server, light as a feather, and it would just be there for all of your broadcasting messages. You could define all of your message type structures. It was glorious. And because TypeScript is a nice typed language on the web these days, you could use that to generate all of the type checking on both ends. It was great. It was really good. Nice. Yeah, definitely still recommend Calisius if you're looking for a lightweight network stack, which is also open source and free, which again, you can't complain if it's open source and free. So yeah. Okay. Did you come up with any questions, Graham? Because I haven't got any questions for them.
I mean, like I could ask some, pretty gnarly questions, and I feel like it's like whenever we ask these questions, we get like 2 people that respond. So I feel like to make the odds high that we will get more than 2 people to respond, I will ask something very simple.
Okay.
Which is, what are the character colors that you used in your demo?
That's a good one.
So if you put that in chat, first 3 people who put that in chat will get a JetBrains license.
We need some sort of like Jeopardy music. I don't know.
We need music, full stop. I can drum on the table, but it's not quite the same, is it? We got a winner. Stick sigil.
Okay.
What?
Tricky triangles. No, hang on. No stick sigil. No. It wasn't red. It was not red, but you did mention the other colors.
I should have clarified. I was going to ask for one of the colors, like any of the 4.
There we go.
To make it easier.
Pancake words, that's all right. You still did mention the other 4, and
I feel
Tricky
like
Triangles and Pancake Pop. You guys were the first 3 answers that at least got the colors that we were looking for.
Okay, say those names again. Tricky Triangles.
Tricky_triangles. Pancake Pop. And Stick Sigil. Now we're going to need you guys to send us your email addresses, and
excellent.
That's the difficult part. You need to figure out how to do that on Twitch. So you can message Graham. You're in chat, right?
I got it. I'm on it.
So Graham's going to post in chat. There you go. So you guys can message Graham, and Graham will get your email addresses, and then we'll send out the license keys. We'll be sending out more we will be giving away more JetBrains licenses next month. So if you missed out this time, don't worry. There'll be another one next month.
Yep.
Hopefully.
And if you stick around long enough, you can get one this year, and then next year you can get another one. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, because they only
never pay for it again.
It's valid for 1 year, so you have to keep coming back every year at least to try and win another license. Okay. All right.
Cool.
Do you have any more questions? If you don't have any more questions, you don't have very long to ask them if you had questions. If you have any ideas for future talks, if you have any requests for future talks, let us know. We are here to try and provide interesting content for you all. So let us know what you want to know about. The known unknowns.
There's links of ways to communicate with us on the meetup page, which I assume everyone has the address to. But
yes, I think there's a link to it from our Twitch page. Yes, there is.
Right. So following links, you can find us on Twitter and DM us or meetup or whatever. There's also like a Google group that doesn't get used as much as it used to because we have Slack now and social media.
Google groups do still exist. They haven't been cancelled yet. Good old Google keeps going through and cancelling things every now and then. So anyway. Right.
Well, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
I felt good to get that off.
I want to go back to the client work project that we're 3 months into and re-architect it.
It's a small library. You can just sneak it in there and then just start using some of the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, joking aside, the nice thing about it is you can kind of incrementally, poke it into a project. So
yeah, it's not a huge lift. It's just create one thing and there you go. You've got that one thing and then you can just it'll just creep its way into everything.
I know what I'm doing for a Global Game Jam weekend.
Hey.
Nice.
Well, there's a crappy crappy turn-based game you can grab from the GitHub link if you really need it. So that's my game jam for that. That'll be my contribution for game jam is some capsules. I almost put arms on them, but then I was like, I can't do this. I just can't. I made them. I did enough. I made them rotate towards each other as they needed to send the particles do the thing.
I was working on a prototype recently, and we had capsules, and we wanted to make sure that we could detect where the capsules were facing. So we put little spheres on them as noses. It was really funny. And then we're like, oh, we got to put googly eyes on it.
Googly eyes. Should have done googly eyes.
Yeah.
With physics, yeah.
Programmer art is the best. All right.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. And we'll be back next month, hopefully.
Yeah.
What was it? Last Wednesday of the month. I don't know what the date will be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Calendar says that is the 23rd.
That's pretty soon. Okay.
Short month. Damn it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to everybody, and we will see you next time.
Yes.
Take care.